At long last, we're finally going to talk about some tips you can do for champion level dungeons to make your fighting easier. I'm going to split this up into actual combat and what I'm going to call preparations for combat, because in Darkest Dungeon, especially at the hardest levels, preparing for the dungeon and having your characters ready is probably 50 to honestly 70% of the fight, and then the other 30% is combat and RNG. You really win or lose before you go into a dungeon, and I'll say maybe 50-50, but honestly I want to push it to maybe 60, even 70, because your party composition, your negative quirks, and your skills really do determine how you're going to tackle a dungeon. So let's get into it. Party composition and max skills. You need to really have good party compositions, and if you're wondering what good party compositions are, I do have videos on that. I have a lot of live runs, and I also have a new campaign series going out, so if you want to look at some things and wonder what a good party is and isn't, go look at those, but I'll try to give a brief explanation in this video so you don't have to leave. You should have a decent touch and feel, but champion level dungeons are really going to test your party composition. You're going to begin to see flaws that you really never notice in the obviously apprentice and veteran level. So good party compositions typically have a way to heal stress, either through massive crit chance, killing enemies quickly, or killing off the enemy stress damage dealers at the beginning of the fight. That's one way. You're probably going to need at least some form of healing, medium to high. If you have zero healing, you better have high speed, a short dungeon, and also really insane damage. And then that usually leaves to about like 2.5 damage dealers, I'll call them. And a 0.5 damage dealer to me can be the Jester or the Houndmaster, because they can stress heal, but they can also do damage. Even the Crusader with their inspiring cry can be a 0.5 to actually a 1.0 damage dealer if you want to count them as a whole one, because I definitely would. And then you get down to your two core damage dealers typically. You might have someone be a utility, you might have them be a man-at-arms, and that's where your party composition starts to need a kind of coming together. You need to know where your damage is coming from, you need to know where your attack row diversity is coming, because doing Crusader and a Leper in the front is a lot of damage, but you can't hit the third and fourth position well, and if you have no one back there to do that, it's not going to go over very well, so that's something to keep in mind. Because I will say it once again, champion level dungeons, so you may have a couple of success, over the long game and mass repetition, bad lineups will be exposed eventually, and that could be a hero death or two. And if you're just getting into champion level dungeons, your 10th dungeon you lose like 2 people, that's a lot of work to redo, and that's not cool. So really losing a hero or 2 even after your 10 or 15 dungeons may not sound bad in theory, but it could really derail, especially if it's a character you only had one of and it was your only level Resolve 6. Finishing up this point with party composition, you're going to want to max your skills out. And you might be thinking, well, duh, obviously. Well, as obvious as it is, you might be tempted to say, well, you know what, I got the veteran stuff, or you know what, I have the max skills, but I'm missing my sword and my armor. Don't do it. Just go buy everything max and then go out, because the only thing that changes from Resolve 5 to 6 is just extra resistances. Because Resolve 6 don't get like extra armor or skills, so just max out the skills and armor, then go get them to Resolve 6 to get those resistances raised. Trust me, it'll save you a lot of time. Negative quirk management. Coming into the veteran late game, it can be pretty difficult because you're going to have like probably a full roster at this point. So we're talking 28 to 30 individuals, and all of them are going to probably have at least a negative quirk to 2. In some situations, some individuals might have 3. That's because you could only fit 3 individuals into a sanitarium, and you figured you might get a negative quirk or 2 per run. And also, negative quirks are expensive to get rid of, so you may not be able to get rid of all of them. Prioritizing your negative quirks is something you must become very efficient at once you hit champion level dungeons. You need to look at your individuals before you take them in, and you need to look at phobias, so zoophobia, fear of humans, whatever, any of those phobias, because that extra % stress you're going to take is now going to be amplified against the highest level stress. It might have been okay when stress damage dealers were only doing 10 and 15 to 20% damage only meant it went to 12. Well, now 20% damage on 20 means you're going to go to 24. You can start to see how that adds up significantly, since these individuals are going to gain more speed, more health, and might even survive 1 round longer than you anticipate. So that 12 stress you're originally going to take is now 48. And you might be thinking, well, that's crazy, that's out of the realm of possibility. It's really not, because even if you allow them to live for the same amount of turns, your HP grows, but not your stress pool. So even though you may kill them in the first turn as normal, you still take 24 to 25 stress in one ability. You are already a quarter of a way to an affliction, and if you are unfortunate and they go twice, you're now going to be at somewhere between like 40 and 44 stress, if not 50, depending on the quirks and trinkets you have on. Trust me, that will devastate you, and it is something that will definitely catch you off guard if you're not prepared. Quirks to keep on that you really don't need to worry about are more stress related, but anything that relates to combat, such as like imposter syndrome, perfectionist, things that reduce your damage above a certain torchlight, things that reduce your speed, things that make you maybe more stun resistant, more stun prone, anything that necessarily ruins you in fights, make sure those are gone before you go out. Understanding the enemy. This is a pretty loaded tip, and I'm not going to be able to go into the depth I want, or this would be like a 40-minute video, if not longer. But your enemies evolve with you, so you get better skills and skills that get different stuff as you evolve. Well, so do they. They get things that can now do this out of stealth, or things that now do blight or bleed or shift that didn't used to, or they're more prone to doing this. Now you have different party compositions on the enemy you're just not used to. So you really need to understand where your enemies are strong at, where they are weak at, where you can utilize them, and what part of the enemy party show your weakness. It might be a high stress damage party, you have no stress heals. You might have to prioritize stress damage dealers at the cost of letting the damage dealers of HP go a turn or two longer than they naturally should or would, just because you can't heal stress that well. You are going to have to take those approaches. And some examples of enemies who don't function as well in certain positions, so shuffle, pooling, or just killing off bodies right away, are going to go as follow. So swine tars are weak in positions 2 to 3 because sometimes the game will glitch or not work right, and they'll just keep trot retreating. Swine tars can do a lot of damage, have a lot of HP and protection, so if you can find a way to get a swine tar stuck on positions 2 to 3 and leave one enemy in the front, you can essentially milk that out as long as the enemy in the front isn't doing too much damage to you. Cultist brawlers are people you'll fight in every dungeon, so it's good to know the cultists, including the witches, because you will fight them in every dungeon you go into. But they're really weak in positions 3 to 4, which means they're weak to shuffles and knockbacks, or potentially pulls. Now you're not going to pull them because they're always going to be position 1 to 2. But let's say you pull position 3 or 4 and there's 2 cultist brawlers. Well, that now pushes him to position 3 where he has to use an ability called Stumbling Scratch. And the champion level Stumbling Scratch, I do believe off the top of my head, is below 90% accuracy already, which means like 30 dodge, which is like almost average dodge at that point with no increases, means he only has a 60% chance to hit, and it's also weaker. So Stumbling Scratch is one of the weaker abilities, and if you can get the brawlers to do that while still benefiting your party, that's an excellent thing to do. And finally we get the Bone Royalty, just another example. They have Tempting Gauntlet, which we use positions 2 and 4. Well, if you have a Bone Royalty sitting in position 3, once again you can maybe shuffle or pull them to position 1 where they have to knife in the dark, which is an ability. Once again, I think the accuracy is like 80 to 90%. It's pretty low, it doesn't do a lot of damage, and saves you that stress damage. So if you can't take stress damage or don't have high dodge, you could maybe consider a pull strat where you pull the Bone Royalty forward and then kill him off. Stress management. I've been alluding to it this whole time already, but stress management is really a huge way to take care of fights, because you're going to get so much stress that it's going to be almost double potentially what you're used to even in veteran, even though they increase, because the enemies get to go faster, they'll dodge more, so they may survive more rounds, which inherently may increase the stress damage they do twice over, because now they get to go twice, which, you know, doubles the skills, all that yada yada, you know what I'm getting at. So you're going to need to figure out who does good stress recovery. If you're going on a medium dungeon, what will be significant enough to reduce the stress? Can you rely on just your camping to do it, or are you going to need someone like a Houndmaster, or are you going to need a designated stress healer such as a Jester with a Bright Tambourine or something to really reduce that? Learning stress management can be done through the lower levels up to veteran, so if you need to go back and practice on some characters on, like, you know, how we prioritize, how we do this, leaving certain enemies alive so we can get multiple turns of stress reduction done, you might have to go back in the lower levels, learn how to do that, because once you get to the higher levels, you're going to almost have to perfect that. Learning the big bad. Once you hit champion level, there are 4 enemies you're going to face, and if you're watching this video, most likely you've probably gone there already. If you haven't, maybe you want to skip this if you don't want to spoil it. If you don't really care, feel free to listen. But you're going to fight things called SQuiDZ, SQuiDZ, a Virago, which I hate, and then a Bone Bear. They all exist in their own separate region. Bone Bearer ruins, a SQuiDZ in the Cove, SQuiDZ in the Warrens, and a Virago in the Weld. All of them come with their very unique abilities. They change the fights 100%. There's none of them that you really fight normally, except maybe SQuiDZ. And the reason why I say SQuiDZ are not normal is because they can do so much damage. You want to prioritize them, but they have a decent amount of HP, dodge, and protection that it makes them very interesting on how to kill them quickly. The only reason why I say SQuiDZ are probably normal, if you bring in a Jester, the SQuiDZ, this is a fun fact, will only target the Jester. So in a way, you can bring along your stress recovery and still have him only target the Jester, and if you put some dodge increased trinkets on him, you can really just dodge the crap out of SQuiDZ and not worry about it too much. But the other 3 will significantly change fights, and you're going to have to learn how to manage with those. If you want some tips on how to manage them, I do have videos of me fighting pretty much all 3 of them. I don't have them specifically laid out, but there is a champion level fight one where I do believe I fight 2 to 3 Bone Bearers, so it's actually a pretty good opportunity to see how they're done. There is a video called a Virago triple threat. Not to say I always handle them perfectly, but at least gives you an opportunity to see how someone else will handle a Virago. Relating to a SQuiDZ, I don't have a lot of videos on them, so that's something that'll be trial and error, and depending on your party, you might want to kill them if you don't have good heals. If you don't have good heals, they do need to die immediately. And then SQuiDZ, as I said, take my advice with the Jester. I know this may not have been exactly what you're thinking. I have a couple of videos where I really dissect fights and all that, but the problem is that these dungeons are so unique, typically, that I would have to do like one of all 4 and then an overarching one anyway. So this is kind of my overarching one. And I'll probably go back through the Weld, the Warrens, and the Cove at this point and give battle tips there. Overall, this is how you really want to handle fights, because you want to learn your enemy, and then, as I said, in the preparation, you want to plan on how to defeat that. I know it sounds obvious, but you can get lulled into a false sense of security when you're in Veteran, because you can do those places with some interesting lineups, I'll say. But once you get to champion level, they do get exposed, or at least they don't work as well, and that does open up the window of opportunity to lose a hero you don't want. Thank you for watching. I hope this helps. If you do want those specific rooms, if you were thinking, oh, I thought this video was going to go over this is how you kill him, this is how you pull him, I can do that. But the problem is there's so many combinations in Darkest Dungeon that even if I did 3 to 4, even 5 fights, there would still be a plethora of fights out there you wouldn't really technically have an example of, so giving you the tool to do it is much better.